At 6:42 on a Thursday evening, my mother told me I was no longer welcome at my father's retirement party. She did not raise her voice. That would have made it easier to recognize what she was doing. Instead, she used the careful tone she saved for instructions she expected me to obey. "You can finish taking care of the payments," she said, "but it would be better if you stayed away on Saturday. Unless you're willing to tell Paige you were wrong." I stood in my kitchen with one hand on the back of a chair. Through the window, I could see the porch light reflected in the glass. My laptop was open on the table because I had been reviewing next week's supplier orders for Brooks Catering. "Let me make sure I understand," I said. "You don't want me at Dad's party, but you still expect my name and card to stay on the event." There was a short pause, not because the question surprised her, because she was deciding how much irritation she was allowed to show. "This isn't about money, Eleanor. In my family, that sentence had always meant the money had already been assigned to me." "Is that a yes?" I asked. "You made a commitment to your father. Paige has worked very hard, and you have embarrassed her at every turn. We need one evening that isn't about your need to control everything." I looked at the time in the corner of my laptop screen. 6:42. I remember it because the vendor dashboard refreshed while she was speaking. 12 new entries appeared beneath the original reservation for Willow Creek Event Center. Premium bar service, live band, stage lighting, floral installation, valet service, upgraded tables and linens, video wall, custom favors, photo booth, specialty dessert service, printed display package, expanded decor labor. Beside each one was the same line, responsible signer, Eleanor Brooks. Some were marked pending. 3 had deposits due the next morning. One showed an initial authorization deadline of the next day at 3. I had never seen those agreements before. "I understand," I said. My mother released a breath, hearing surrender where I had offered only acknowledgement. "Good. I knew you would be reasonable." She ended the call before I could ask what reasonable meant to her. I opened the first agreement. My name appeared at the top as billing contact and responsible party. The signature field at the bottom was empty. Attached to the account was an email I had sent 5 weeks earlier, the one that said my contribution could not exceed $4,800 and that all changes required written approval. The 12 additions brought the proposed event to nearly 3 times the amount our family had agreed to spend. I did not cancel anything. I did not call my sister. I did not send my father a speech about everything I had done for him. I opened a blank email and typed one sentence. "I will honor the original contribution I approved, but I do not authorize this agreement, accept responsibility for its balance, or permit my name to be used as its signer." Then I saved it as a draft and opened the second contract. The next morning, my phone sounded before I had unlocked the front door of Brooks Catering. "Willow Creek Event Center. Vendor hold requires action." I read the alert under the yellow security light while balancing my coffee and the office keys. The premium bar vendor needed a verified payer by noon. The live band wanted a deposit by the end of the day. Paige had entered my email address on both. Inside, the prep kitchen was already awake. Metal trays moved along counters. The exhaust fans hummed overhead. Before I reached my desk, a driver told me his refrigerated van was making a grinding noise. Our kitchen supervisor said one of the weekend servers had the flu, and a produce invoice appeared with a surcharge that had not been in the quote. All 3 people came to me. My official title was Operations Manager. It sounded more important than it felt. I made the schedules, solved delivery problems, checked event contracts, and kept 40 people from discovering how many small failures could fit inside one Saturday. I was paid for that job, although not what another company would have paid. The rest had accumulated gradually. When our bookkeeper retired, Dad asked me to cover the books for a month or two. That was 7 years earlier. Insurance renewals followed, tax folders, vendor disputes, payroll corrections. My father referred to all of it as me helping until they found someone. They never looked for someone while I kept doing it. I called the mechanic about the van, moved a server from Sunday to Saturday, and found the produce quote with the agreed price. Then I opened the Willow Creek alert. The original agreement was attached beneath it. 5 weeks earlier, my parents had sat across from me at their dining table with a printed proposal between us. My father, Frank Brooks, was retiring after 36 years of building Brooks Catering from a rented church kitchen into a regional business. The party was meant for family, employees, and a few longtime clients. 70 guests. A standard dinner at Willow Creek, where our own staff could attend instead of working. The base package was simple: the room, standard meal service, basic linens, house sound, and a dessert table. My parents had $6,000 set aside. I offered to contribute up to $4,800 as my gift. That's more than enough, Dad had said. I don't need a circus. I had looked at Paige when he said it. My younger sister was scrolling through pictures of floral walls on her phone. Any changes come back to the four of us, I said. Not because I care about napkin colors, because the agreement is in my name. Dad initialed the one-page budget. Mom wrote the date beside his initials. Paige gave me a theatrical salute. Yes, ma'am. No unauthorized napkins. I signed the base reservation after that. Now, in the present, I compared the live alert with the signed plan. Premium bar service was not on it. Neither was a band, a video wall, or a valet team. The base agreement carried my initials on every page. The new files had my name typed into the contact fields, but none carried my initials or signature. At 9:15, Paige called the office. "Did you get a message from the venue?" she asked. "Several." "Great. They need the bar deposit. I told them you would handle it." I turned my chair toward the window, overlooking the loading area. "Why would you tell them that?" "Because you're the person on the account. I'm the person on the original account. It's the same party. Eleanor." That was how Paige understood responsibility. If two expenses belong to the same celebration, they belong to the same person. Usually me. She had volunteered to manage what she called the guest experience. There was history behind that choice, but not the kind that required a tour through our childhood. The immediate truth was enough. Paige believed I controlled every practical part of the family because practical problems kept ending up on my desk. She wanted one thing with her name on it. Dad had been delighted. "Let her run with it," he told me. "It means a lot that both my girls are doing this." Mom said dividing the work would bring us closer, so I gave Paige coordinator access to the Willow Creek dashboard. She could view the schedule, communicate with the venue, upload guest information, and compare options. She could not sign an agreement or change the payer. I explained that distinction twice. Paige heard the first half and treated the second as my usual caution. At first, she used the access well. She called former employees and collected photographs from the years before I joined the business. She found a retired baker named Luis, who still had a picture of Dad standing beside our first delivery van, one hand resting on a door held shut with rope. She persuaded 3 longtime clients to record short messages. For 2 weeks, every choice she made was about people rather than objects. I liked that version of the party. I told her so. The shift began when one of Dad's former competitors announced a retirement dinner at a downtown hotel. Paige sent me photographs from the event: up lighting, a stage, a printed wall of company milestones. Dad built more than this man did, she wrote. Why should his night look smaller? I replied that recognition did not have to be measured in rentals. She answered with a thumbs up, then requested pricing for stage lights. That was Paige's mixed motive in one exchange. She wanted Dad honored. She also wanted the room to prove that she had honored him properly. The more visible the result, the more visible her contribution would be. I understood the feeling. Much of my own work disappeared the moment it succeeded. A delivery arrived. An invoice matched. A server showed up. No one applauded the absence of a crisis. The difference was that I had learned to ask what a solution cost before promising it. Paige believed the promise created its own budget. The first sign of trouble had been the invitations. She ordered thick cards with gold foil before checking the approved amount. When the invoice arrived, it was $800 over her line in the budget. I could have sent it back and made her explain it to Dad. Instead, I called the printer, reduced the card stock, removed a second insert, and shifted money from a delivery allowance we no longer needed. The invitations went out. No one knew there had been a problem. Paige thanked me by saying, "See, I knew you could make it work." Dad praised her initiative. Then he asked me not to turn every decision into paperwork. By saving Paige from one embarrassing mistake, I had taught her the wrong lesson. I thought I was protecting the party. She thought I had proved that my limits were only the first draft of what I would eventually pay. The bar deposit is not in the budget, I told her now. The budget changed. Who approved the change? Dad loves the idea. That isn't what I asked. She paused, then said, "This is why Mom thinks you should step back." My email chimed. Another Willow Creek notice appeared, this time for stage lighting. The first vendor deadline was less than 3 hours away. "Send me the total for all changes," I said. "There isn't one total. They are different vendors." "Then I will make one." "Of course you will." She hung up. I printed the original 1-page budget and placed it beside my keyboard. At the top, in my father's handwriting, were 3 words: "This is enough." The next alert showed that Paige had added a floral installation, costing more than the entire original dessert service. That morning, I finally stopped fixing the problem in front of me and asked who would have to see it if I did not. Paige had shown us her vision for the party the previous Sunday. She connected her laptop to my parents' television and stood beside it with a remote in her hand. The first image was a darkened room, washed in amber light. The second showed a wall of white flowers behind a gold sign bearing my father's name. Then came a band, a polished bar, a valet stand, and a video screen playing photographs from the history of Brooks Catering. Dad leaned forward in his chair. "You found all this locally?" he asked. "Every bit of it," Paige said. "People should walk in and understand what you built." I understood why he liked it. My father had spent most of his career entering through service stores. He could tell you which banquet halls had broken loading ramps and which hotels hid their dishwashing area behind a curtain. A room arranged around him, instead of around someone else's celebration, carried an emotional weight that a spreadsheet could not measure. That did not make it free. "What is the revised total?" I asked. Paige clicked to the next image instead of answering. "This video wall will run pictures from Dad's first kitchen, all the way through last year's county awards." "What is the revised total?" Mom frowned at me. Can she finish? I waded through the favors, the custom desserts, and the proposed entrance for my father. When the presentation ended, Paige closed the laptop. "A lot of these are just holds," she said. "We're not spending all of it today." A hold becomes a bill when someone signs it. There you go again. Dad sat back, the warmth from the presentation already fading. "Eleanor, it is a retirement party, not an acquisition." "Then the total should be easier to answer, sir." No one answered it. On Friday morning, I built the answer myself. The dashboard did not display one revised price. Each vendor had a separate page, its own deposit schedule, and its own cancellation terms. The premium bar agreement showed me as the payer. The band listed me as client representative. The floral company had my home address. The valet service had my mobile number, although I had never spoken to anyone there. I entered every amount into a spreadsheet. When I finished, the 12 editions totaled $18,640 before service fees. That was on top of the original dinner. The number did not include 3 variable charges tied to attendance and labor. It could climb higher. I called the bar vendor first and asked how my name had entered its agreement. The representative read from her notes. "Your event coordinator identified you as the financial contact and said you had approved the premium package in principle." "Did she provide written approval from me?" "No. That is why the deposit remains pending." The band had a similar note. "Family bookkeeper will execute final agreement." The floral company had been told I was managing all payments. Paige had not forged anything at that point. She had done something easier to defend inside a family. She had described my future consent as settled. I asked every vendor to add the same note. Coordinator access did not include authority to sign or charge me. None of them argued. They did not care which sister had the better motive. They wanted a valid agreement and a payer who knew the amount. That contrast sharpened the problem. People outside my family understood my boundary the first time I stated it. The people inside my family treated clarity as aggression because ambiguity had always worked in their favor. At the top of a second page, I wrote 4 columns: item, requested by, authorized by, responsible payer. The first column was full. The second said page 12 times. The final 2 were blank. At 11:20, I emailed the matrix to Paige, Mom, and Dad. I wrote that my $4,800 contribution remained available for the original base event. I wrote that no upgrade could use my name, card, or signature without separate written approval. I attached the premium bar notice showing that a verified payer was required by noon. I ended with 2 questions. Who is authorizing the 12 editions? Who is paying for them? Paige answered in 6 minutes. "I cannot believe you are making Dad's retirement about control." Mom answered 4 minutes after that. This could have been a conversation. It had been a conversation. I had asked for the total in their living room. The difference was that email left less room to pretend the question had not been asked. Dad replied at 12:11. We will sort it out. Please stop upsetting everyone. The premium bar deadline passed without a payer. At 12:17, the vendor changed the agreement from hold active to verification required. That was the first consequence no one could hand back to me with a disappointed look. Paige called 2 minutes later. They froze it while I was speaking to the manager. They asked for a payer at noon. I told you about that this morning. You told me to handle it. You did not ask me to approve it. What is the difference if you knew it was due? Knowing your deadline does not make it my bill. She said I was playing with words. I asked whether she wanted me to forward the authorization form so she could complete it herself. I am coordinating, she said. You are doing the financial part. I agreed to a capped contribution, not an unlimited financial part. Then call Dad and tell him which pieces of his party you don't think he deserves. That sentence showed me why the lunch invitation would not be a budget meeting. Paige had already built a moral frame around the upgrades. A band was not a band anymore. It was evidence of love. A video wall was respect. Asking who would pay became an accusation against Dad's worth. I forwarded her the blank authorization form anyway. She never opened the identity link. Mom asked us to come for lunch on Saturday. She said the four of us needed to clear the air before the final week of preparations. Paige arrived with her tablet and placed it face down beside her plate. Dad carved a roast. Mom served potatoes. For the first 10 minutes, everyone spoke about weather and the repairs on the catering van. Then Paige said, I would like to know why Eleanor thinks I am incapable of planning one evening. I set down my fork. I asked who is signing the upgrades and who is paying for them. Exactly. You make everything sound like an audit. Those are the two questions the vendors are asking. No, they are asking because you frightened them. I looked at Dad. Did you approve $18,640 in additions? His eyebrows lifted. It is not going to cost that. That is the current total before variable fees. Paige reached for her tablet. Some of those won't make the final cut. Which ones? We are still deciding. The vendors have deadlines. Deciding requires someone authorized to say yes or no. Mom pressed her napkin flat beside her plate. Your sister is trying to do something beautiful for your father. Why can't you support her without making her defend every choice? I am supporting the dinner we agreed to. If Paige wants something different, she needs a different payer. Dad's jaw tightened. We have never let each other down over money. It sounded generous until I noticed that no one at the table had offered his own name for the contracts. Then put that in writing, I said. Choose the upgrades you want. Name the person signing. Name the account paying. I will send the vendors whatever you decide. Paige stared at me as if I had insulted her. You love this, she said. You love making everyone come through you. I am trying to get myself out of the middle by threatening Dad's party. Nothing in the original package is threatened. I placed a printed copy of the responsibility matrix beside Dad's plate. He did not look at it. That refusal mattered more than if he had torn it up. The information was there. He chose not to know it. I left after lunch without changing the $4,800 cap. On the drive home, I received another alert. The floral vendor wanted written approval by Monday. The video wall needed a deposit on Tuesday. The band had moved from a courtesy hold to a provisional booking. Paige did not need me to approve her taste. She needed me to make her choices real. On Monday morning, the premium bar company released its hold. That did not mean the bar was gone forever. It meant the vendor would not reserve extra staff or inventory without a verified payer. Paige could still restore it if someone signed and paid before the remaining capacity was booked. She told my mother I had canceled the bar. By lunch, Mom was in my office. She closed the door behind her and remained standing. Through the glass wall, 2 coordinators were reviewing a wedding delivery schedule. I kept my voice low because they did not need to hear my family business mixed into company business. "You have made Paige look foolish in front of the venue," Mom said. "The vendor asked for a payer. Paige did not provide one because she believed the family had already agreed. The family did not sign the contract. This is the way you talk to people now. Contract, authorization, verification. She's your sister, and she entered my name as responsible payer." Mom shifted her handbag from one arm to the other. "She wants you to tell her you were wrong, to question her in front of your father." Was I wrong? That is not the point. It is the only point that affects the bill. Her expression hardened. "Your father has one retirement party. Paige has spent weeks trying to make it special, and you are determined to prove that she cannot do anything without you." I gave her access. I gave her the budget. I fixed the invitations. I am still paying what I promised. "Then why can't you say you are sorry and let the rest go?" "Because the rest is $18,000 in my name." She left without answering. 20 minutes later, Marcus called my office. We had not spoken since the base agreement was signed. "I want to separate 2 issues," he said. "Your original reservation is in good standing. The upgrade vendors are asking whether they should continue holding labor and equipment under your name. I have not signed any upgrade. That matches our records. Your coordinator has represented that final approval is expected." "It isn't." He did not ask me to explain my family. He asked whether I wanted to remain listed as the intended signer while they waited. That wording mattered. Remaining listed would keep the path open for vendors to plan around my eventual yes. Removing the expectation would force Paige to name someone else before the next deadline. "Leave the base reservation alone," I said. "Mark every addition as requiring a different verified signer unless I approve it separately in writing. I can note the account now. We will need a formal notice for each vendor agreement." He emailed the required language before we ended the call. That conversation did not create the boundary. It translated it into a process no one could pretend not to understand. Over the next 2 days, 3 more vendors changed their status to verification required. Each change produced a new message from Paige. She did not send totals or name a payer. She sent accusations. "You are humiliating Dad. You always need the final say. If the party looks unfinished, everyone will know why." I replied once, with the matrix attached. "The base event is fully funded. Please identify the signer and payer for any additions you want to keep." On Thursday evening, Mom called me at 6:42. That was where this story began, but hearing the full week behind the words did not make them less blunt. "You can finish taking care of the payments," she said, "but it would be better if you stayed away on Saturday. Unless you're willing to tell Paige you were wrong." The gala was not that Saturday. It was 9 days away. My mother was removing me early enough to make the exclusion feel organized, but not early enough to replace what the family expected me to provide. After I asked, whether they still expected my name and card to remain on the event. And after she told me this was not about money, I asked for one more thing. Please send me what you just said in a text. Why? So I don't misunderstand you later. You never misunderstand anything. Eleanor. Then there should be no problem putting it in writing. The text arrived 2 minutes after she ended the call. Paige and your father need peace on his night. Please complete the payments you committed to, but do not attend unless you are prepared to make things right with your sister. I read it twice. Then I saved a screenshot in the event folder with the contracts. That night, I finished the notice I had drafted for each of the 12 editions. I used the same language every time. I was not the signer. I had not approved the agreement. I would not accept its charges. The vendor could remove my name or obtain a new verified signer by the stated deadline. On every notice, I added a final sentence. This does not alter the original base reservation or the contribution I approved for it. I sent the first notice at 7:28 and the 12th at 8:16. Willow Creek's contracts manager replied before 9. His name was Marcus Reed. I had spoken with him once when I signed the base reservation. He was the kind of person who repeated numbers back before ending a call. We have restricted signing access while we verify the account. Standard contracted services remain active. I will contact the listed coordinators about signer replacement. At 9:14, Paige called me. I let it go to voicemail. What did you do to the dashboard? It won't let me submit anything. You need to fix this tonight. I saved the message. I did not answer because Marcus had already told her what needed to happen. A new signer had to be verified. That signer did not have to be me. Friday afternoon, Marcus called about the first combined deposit deadline. Miss Brooks, I want to make certain you understand the available options. He said, the upgrades can still be preserved. If you choose to remain the responsible signer, we can restore access after identity verification. The outstanding deposits would need to be addressed by 3 o'clock. He was not pressuring me. He was giving the person named on the account a final opportunity to keep the event as ordered. For several seconds, I pictured the easiest path. I could sign. I could move money from my savings and tell myself I would sort out reimbursements later. The band would arrive. The flowers would go up. Dad would enter beneath Paige's gold sign. Mom would stop calling me difficult. Paige would learn that even banning me from the room did not interrupt the services I provided. I had followed that path in smaller ways for years. It always felt like preserving peace in the moment. Later, it became evidence that the next rescue was reasonable. I will keep my original contribution, I told Marcus. I will not sign the upgrades. Understood. Please keep the base event separate from the disputed work. My family may replace me as payer if they choose. That is how the account is marked. When the call ended, nothing dramatic happened in my office. The phones kept ringing. A delivery driver asked where to put 6 cases of glassware. Someone laughed in the kitchen. But I had finally allowed a consequence to remain where another person had created it. My family still had choices. I was no longer one of them. The first person my father asked to replace me was my mother. I learned that from Diane, not from him. She called Saturday morning and began without greeting me. Your father wants me to put the band on our card, she said. Are you asking my opinion? I am asking why a band needs this much information. The vendor had requested a billing address, identification, and authorization for the deposit. Nothing unusual. It felt unusual to Mom, because I had always handled those steps before she saw them. Because the person paying has to agree to the charge. I said, "We agree to the charge. Then you can complete the form." She lowered her voice. "The card limit is not high enough for the band and the flowers." There it was. Not disagreement. Not confusion. A limit. Mom and Dad had budgeted $6,000 for the base dinner. They were not poor, but retirement had made Dad cautious about savings. Paige earned a good living selling commercial insurance, yet most of her income was already committed to a mortgage, 2 car payments, and the private school she had chosen for her daughter. She could pay for 1 or 2 decorative items. She could not pay for the event she had presented. For weeks, all 3 of them had been spending the same imaginary money. What they believed I would contribute after my first no became inconvenient. "The base party is paid for," I reminded Mom. "You keep saying that as if a bare room and dinner are enough." Dad said they were enough when he initialed the budget, before he saw what the evening could be. Then he can decide what the difference is worth to him. She ended the call. On Monday, Marcus sent a 1-page document to everyone listed on the event account. It had 2 columns. The left side was labeled contracted and funded. Room for 70 guests. Standard meal service. Basic linens. House sound. Dessert table. The right side was labeled pending verified payer. 12 upgrades. At the bottom, he wrote that the funded services would proceed regardless of what happened to the additions. A new signer could preserve any upgrades still available by completing verification and paying its required deposit before the final Friday at 3 cutoff, 1 week after the first deposit deadline I had declined. The document removed the most useful story Paige had been telling. Willow Creek was not threatening to cancel Dad's party. I was not holding dinner hostage. The room, food, sound system, and dessert were secure. Paige called Marcus within 10 minutes. I know, because he logged communications in the shared account. Her note appeared as, "Coordinator requested removal of base pending comparison from family distribution. Request declined." That afternoon, Dad called me, his first call since the lunch at his house. "I thought you said you weren't canceling anything," he said. I didn't. "Then why is Paige telling me half the room won't be set up? Did you read Marcus's scope sheet?" "I don't want another document. I want a straight answer." "The straight answer is that your original dinner is funded. The upgrades are not. Paige says the room will look unfinished. It will look like the room you chose 5 weeks ago." He exhaled sharply. "You know what this night means to me." "I do. That is why I offered $4,800 and signed the original reservation. Your sister is trying to make it memorable. Then someone has to pay for what she ordered. Everything with you comes down to a transaction." I looked around my office. Through the glass, one of our coordinators was checking a load sheet I had designed. On my second monitor, payroll waited for approval. Behind me, 7 years of books sat in labeled cabinets. "No," I said. "Everything with me eventually becomes a transaction because no one else asks who accepted the bill." Dad did not answer that. He told me he had a delivery arriving and ended the call. Paige tried to transfer the floral agreement into Dad's name that evening. She typed his address and date of birth into the form. When the system sent an identity link to his email, he did not complete it. Marcus returned the agreement as incomplete. She tried the video wall next. Same results. Then she changed tactics. She called Dad at Brooks Catering while he was walking through the kitchen, saying goodbye to employees who had known him for 20 years. She told him the venue was embarrassing her over details Eleanor had invented. "I am standing here trying to finish your tribute," she said loudly enough for 2 people to hear. "And they keep acting like I'm stealing something." Dad hated scenes inside the business. He also hated paperwork that forced him to choose between 2 members of his family. "Just handle it, Paige," he said. "Whatever they need, handle it." He did not ask what she intended to sign. He did not complete the verification form. He used a broad instruction because a precise one would have required him to see the problem. Paige treated the sentence as authority. The next morning, she came into my office while I was at the county health department renewing a permit. Our receptionist saw her go down the hall, but had no reason to stop her. Paige was the owner's daughter. She had been in that building since she was a teenager. She opened the second drawer of the lateral file cabinet behind my desk. That cabinet held closed catering contracts, arranged by year. My signature appeared hundreds of times inside it. She removed a contract from the previous December, photographed the signature page, and returned the folder 1 slot too high. I did not know any of that yet. What I knew was that at 2:41 on Wednesday afternoon, an automated email arrived from Willow Creek. Final upgrade authorization received. I opened the file. My name was written on the signature line. It was close enough to fool someone who had never watched me sign a contract. The large E curved the right way. The B leaned forward. But every Brooks Catering agreement I signed carried my initials beside the cancellation paragraph and the final total. This one did not. The phone number beneath the signature belonged to Paige. The email address belonged to me because the system would not let her replace the original account address. For a moment I studied the name as if it belonged to another Eleanor Brooks, one who had agreed to fund a band, a wall of flowers, and a premium bar for a party she had been told not to attend. Then I downloaded the file and called Marcus. He answered with, "I was about to call you. That is not my signature. That is why the authorization has not been released." One of the vendors had noticed the missing initials. Marcus had also compared the submission time with the restriction on the account. The contact number change had triggered a second review. "What happens now?" I asked. "Standard setup proceeds. Disputed setup will remain on administrative hold until the listed signer appears with identification or another payer completes verification." "Do you need me there?" "Not today. I will send a written request before the event if in-person verification is necessary." After the call, I locked the filing cabinet. I did not confront Paige. If I called, she would tell me she had only done what Dad wanted. Dad would say he had not meant signing my name. Mom would ask why I was choosing the week of the party to make this bigger. The file already answered the question that mattered. Someone had decided my no was only an obstacle to be copied over. Marcus emailed me at 7:06 on the morning of the gala. "We require the listed signer to verify the disputed authorization in person. Please report to the contracts office with identification and any original account records. You are not required to enter the event space." The party began at 6. Setup had started at 8. I had already planned to spend the day at home. Mom's text remained in my event folder, clear about where I was not wanted. I had bought Dad a leather-bound book containing photographs of the first Brooks Catering kitchen and notes from former employees. After the exclusion, I mailed it to his house instead of carrying it into the gala. Now I dressed for an appointment, not a celebration. Navy trousers, a white shirt, flat shoes. I put my driver's license, the original agreement, the one-page budget, my CAP email, the responsibility matrix, and Marcus's restriction notice into a plain gray folder. At 8:22, I parked behind Willow Creek near the service entrance. The loading area looked familiar. Rental trucks backed toward double doors. Staff rolled tables over metal ramps. A florist's van stood near the gate, but its rear doors were closed. Two men beside a stack of lighting cases were drinking coffee and checking their phones. Inside, the base event was moving forward. Standard round tables had been placed in the hall. Ivory house linens covered half of them. The venue's sound technician tested a microphone at the front of the room. In the corridor, trays for the dessert table waited on a cart. The disputed work remained outside or boxed. There was no stage for the band, no video wall, no floral installation rising behind Dad's chair. The premium bar had not delivered. None of that meant the room was empty. It meant the room looked like the plan my father had called enough. Paige stood near the main entrance with a clipboard. She saw me before I reached the office corridor. "What are you doing here?" The question would have been almost funny if she had not signed my name to get me there. Marcus asked me to verify an authorization. Her eyes went to the folder in my hand. "You said you weren't coming. I am not attending the party. You cannot walk in here on Dad's day and start another review." The review started when someone submitted my signature. She stepped closer. "Dad told me to handle it." "Did he tell you to sign my name?" "He told me to make sure the party happened." The party was already happening. Behind her, venue staff carried a stack of chairs toward the hall. Paige glanced at them and lowered her voice. "You know what this is going to look like. A dinner for 70 people. It will look like I failed." That was the first honest sentence she had given me about the upgrades. Before I could answer, Marcus opened the contracts office door. "Miss Brooks," he said to me. Then, to Paige, "We will speak with all coordinators after identity review." His office held a desk, 3 chairs, and a wall of shelves filled with event binders. Nothing about it suggested rescue or punishment. It was a place where paperwork either matched or did not. I gave him my license. He copied the number onto a verification form and placed the submitted authorization beside the base agreement. "Please confirm the signature on page 4 of the base agreement," he said. "Mine." "The initials beside section 7? "Mine." He moved to the upgrade authorization. "Signature on page 3? "Not mine." "Phone number?" "My sister's." "Email?" "Mine." It could not be changed after the restriction. He made a note. Then he aligned the pages so the signatures sat side by side. The copied version caught the large shapes. It missed the habits. I always lifted my pen before the final stroke in Brooks. On the copied signature, the name was one continuous line. My initials were absent from the total and cancellation clauses. Marcus opened the dashboard history. The base agreement had been created 5 weeks earlier from my account and signed after Dad initialed the budget. The 12 upgrades had been added through Paige's coordinator login. My written boundary came next. Then the restriction notice. Then 2 failed attempts to transfer vendor agreements to Dad. Finally, the authorization bearing my name had arrived with Paige's phone number. There was no single dramatic piece of evidence. There was a sequence. That was more useful. At 8:47, Dad arrived in the office corridor with Mom behind him. He wore pressed slacks and a blue shirt. His suit jacket hung over one arm. Paige must have called him as soon as I entered the building. "You said you were staying away," he told me. "I am here because my signature was submitted. This is my retirement party. Eleanor, not one of your vendor disputes." Marcus stepped into the doorway. "Mr. Brooks, the room and contracted meal remain in setup. We are reviewing authorization for additional services." Dad barely looked at him. His attention stayed on me. "You stripped everything out because you couldn't run it." I opened my folder and gave him the responsibility matrix. I removed my name from 12 additions I did not approve. Your room, dinner, linens, sound system, and dessert are being set up right now. Paige says you locked the account. The venue restricted signing after I reported my name on contracts I had not signed. You knew she was planning upgrades. Knowing an item exists is not agreeing to pay for it. Mom stood beside him with her hands folded around her purse. "Could we please solve this privately?" Marcus answered before I did. "We can keep the review inside this office. We do need a decision before the remaining vendors release their crews." Paige came through the corridor door. "I already gave you authorization," she said. Marcus returned to his desk and turned the upgrade page toward her. "Ms. Brooks has confirmed this is not her signature." Paige looked at me. "You told me you would cover Dad's party." "I told you I would contribute $4,800 to the base event. You said you would make it work." "I made the invitations work. I did not give you permanent authority to spend my money." Dad looked from Paige to the page. "Did you sign her name?" Paige's answer came too quickly. "You told me to handle it." "That was not what I asked. You wanted the party done." She was blocking every step. "Paige." Mom said, "Did you sign it?" Paige pressed her lips together. Then she said, "I knew Eleanor would approve it once she saw there was no other option." Marcus did not react. He clicked open a file and read from my notice. At the time the authorization was submitted, Ms. Brooks had already stated that she would not sign, guarantee, or pay for the upgrades. She was angry. Paige said, "Families say things." There it was again. My written no had been treated as an emotion that would expire. Dad finally looked down at the matrix. He read the total, then the blank authorized by and payer columns. 18,000 before variable fees, I said. He turned to Paige. "You told me it was mostly deposits." "It is spread out. That doesn't make it smaller." It was the first thing he had said about the money that sounded like he had actually seen it. Marcus placed the scope sheet beside the matrix. "There are 2 available paths," he said. "A verified payer can sign for any upgrade whose vendor still has capacity. We would need identification and payment now, or the event proceeds under the original funded scope." "How much to keep everything?" Dad asked. Marcus gave him the updated figure, including service fees and the remaining rush charges. Dad sat in the chair nearest the door. Mom asked whether the flowers could stay if the band went. Marcus checked availability. The florist had already reassigned part of its crew, but a smaller arrangement could be purchased directly with a new card. Paige asked about the video wall, Its team needed full payment before unloading. Each question received an answer. None of the answers included my name. Dad looked at me once more. You could settle this in 5 minutes. I could put it back on me in 5 minutes, I said. That is not the same as settling it. He rubbed a hand across his forehead. For most of my adult life, that gesture had been enough to move me. It meant Dad was tired. It meant I knew the system better. It meant I could spare him one more difficulty. This time, the difficulty was the decision he had avoided at lunch, in the email, and on the identity form. Use the original package, he told Marcus. Paige stared at him. Dad, we have a room. We have dinner. We have the people I invited. Everyone is expecting more. Then you should not have promised more before we could pay for it. The sentence did not turn Dad into a different man. He still looked resentful when he glanced at me. He had reached the truth because every easier exit was gone, not because he suddenly understood all the years behind it. Marcus printed 2 pages. The first confirmed that I disputed the upgrade authorization and bore no liability for it. The second restored the account to the original scope under my existing capped contribution, with Dad accepting responsibility for the family portion already budgeted. I signed besides the statement saying the copied signature was not mine. Dad signed the base scope confirmation. Paige signed nothing. Before I left, Marcus asked if I wanted a copy of the incident record. Yes, I said. Email and paper. In the corridor, Mom caught up with me. Are you really leaving? You asked me not to attend. That was before all this. All this is why you asked. Your father is upset. He still has his party. She looked toward the hall, where staff were setting water glasses on the tables. It won't be what Paige told everyone. It will be what the family funded. I walked out through the service entrance at 9:31. The florist's van was gone. The lighting cases were being loaded back onto a truck. Through the open receiving door, I could hear someone testing the house microphone. 1, 2. 1, 2. The sound carried clearly across the room. Nothing had been destroyed. Nothing had been hidden either. I did not spend Saturday waiting for news from Willow Creek. I went to the grocery store, cleaned the cabinet under my kitchen sink, took a long walk before the afternoon heat settled in. At 6, when the party began, I turned my phone face down and made dinner. At 7:18, Teresa Alvarez sent me a photograph. Teresa had worked with Dad for 22 years. She was standing beside him near the dessert table. Behind them were ivory linens, a wooden lectern, and a simple printed sign that said congratulations. Frank. Her message read, good food. Full room. Your dad cried when Luis showed the van picture. Thought you would want to know. I looked at the photograph once and replied, thank you. I'm glad the staff are there. Then I put the phone away again. The event had not become the display Paige promised. There was no live band. Willow Creek used its house playlist between speeches. There was no video wall, so Luis held up the old photograph while telling the story of the first delivery van. Mom paid directly for 2 modest floral arrangements from the venue's available stock. The standard dessert table carried a sheet cake from a local bakery instead of 12 individual specialty desserts. I know those details because the final event report came to the original signer on Monday. I also heard them from employees when I returned to Brooks Catering. No one described a disaster. They described Dad shaking hands with every employee. They described a dishwasher named Kenny making the funniest speech of the evening. They described Paige spending the first hour explaining why some things had changed, and the second hour taking photographs as if that had always been the plan. The party was smaller than her promise and larger than her fear. Dad was honored. Paige was embarrassed. Both facts could exist without me paying $18,000 to erase the second one. At 8:30 Monday morning, I placed 3 binders on Dad's desk. The first contained current accounts payable and receivable. The second held payroll, insurance, and tax deadlines. The third held vendor contracts, renewal dates, and access instructions. I included a list of decisions due in the next 30 days and the name of a licensed accountant who had availability to take over the books. Dad looked at the binders and then at me. What is this? The bookkeeping handoff. Handoff to whom? To you and whichever accountant you hire. He pushed his chair back. You are still the operations manager. Until the date in this letter. I placed my resignation on top of the first binder. I gave 4 weeks' notice for the paid operations role because 40 employees did not create my family dispute. I ended the unpaid bookkeeping immediately, except for answering the accountant's transition questions in scheduled sessions. You cannot do this the Monday after my retirement party. I started the handoff before the party. I waited until today to give you the final package. Because you wanted to punish me. Because Saturday showed that this arrangement no longer works. The arrangement kept this company alive. The work kept it alive. The arrangement kept the work free. He opened the resignation letter, but did not read past the first paragraph. Do you know what an outside accountant charges? Yes. The proposals are in the second binder. And who is supposed to do your job? I wrote a transition plan for the coordinators. You will still need to hire or promote someone. His face changed when he realized I had not arrived with a threat. Threats could be negotiated. I had arrived with dates, passwords to be transferred, and work divided into tasks someone else would have to own. Stay through the end of the year, he said. Give us time to get settled. 4 weeks is enough for the operational handoff. The accountant can start next Monday. You owe the employees more than that. That is why I am not leaving today. You always have an answer. I have a plan. That is what you have been asking me to provide for years. He turned toward the window. For a moment, I wanted him to say he had not understood how much I was carrying. Instead, he asked whether I had already spoken to the bank about removing my account access. The transfer forms are in the blue folder, I said. It was not the acknowledgement I wanted. It was evidence that he understood the boundary was real. The accountant, Mr. Patel, arrived the following Monday. During our first transition session, he asked Dad, who had been reviewing monthly statements. Dad pointed at me. And reconciliations. Dad pointed again. Insurance audits. Again, Mr. Patel looked at the task list. This is not occasional family help. This is a recurring position. Dad said she was already here. Mr. Patel did not argue. He wrote an estimated monthly fee on his pad and slid it across the desk. That number did what years of my explanations had not. It gave my invisible labor a market price. Paige called me that evening. People are asking what happened with the party, she said. Who? Aunt Carol. 2 people from Dad's business group. They noticed the room was different from the invitations. Then tell them the family used the original package. They think you pulled the money at the last minute. Do you want the venue's confirmation? I want you to explain that I did not try to ruin anything. I almost admired the request. She wanted me to defend her from the consequence of the story she had told. I will send the confirmation to you. Mom and Dad, I said. I am not contacting relatives. So you are going to let them blame me. I am going to let you decide what you tell them. I emailed the immediate family 3 documents: my original cap, Diane's exclusion text, and Marcus's confirmation that the base event had never been canceled. I included no commentary. Mom responded the next morning. Can we please put this behind us? Your father is under enough pressure with the transition. I wrote back, I am willing to have limited family contact. I am not willing to manage family contracts, loans, accounts, passwords, or consequences. Business transition questions must go through the scheduled handoff. Dad did not respond in writing. He asked twice more whether I could stay longer. The first time, I pointed to the transition schedule. The second time, I told him my answer would not change if he waited a week to ask. Paige never gave me a full apology. She said she should not have used my signature, then added that I had left her with no choice. I told her a choice she disliked was still a choice. At the end of 4 weeks, I returned my office keys. The new operations supervisor had accepted the role at a salary higher than mine. Mr. Patel had taken over the books. Dad now received an invoice for work he once described as me helping while I was already there. Brooks Catering did not collapse. It adjusted. That was important to me. I did not need the business destroyed to prove I had been necessary. I needed it to continue without pretending my necessity was free. For the first 2 weeks after leaving Brooks Catering, I woke before 6 with the feeling that I had forgotten a delivery. I would reach for my phone, then remember that the weekend staffing list belonged to someone else. No supplier had my personal number for emergencies. No insurance renewal waited in a folder behind my desk. The absence of those obligations did not feel like freedom immediately. It felt like a room after a machine had been turned off, when your ears still expected the noise. I began applying for operations jobs. Writing my resume required me to stop using the word helped. I had not helped with 40-person staffing. I had managed it. I had not helped with vendor contracts. I had negotiated and administered them. I had not helped with the books. I had maintained records another professional now charged a monthly fee to maintain. 3 months after the party, I accepted an operations position with a regional food service supplier. The salary was higher. The title matched the work. My responsibilities fit on 2 pages. And when the company asked me to approve a contract, the authority and spending limit appeared in the same paragraph. On my first Friday there, my manager stopped at my desk at 5:10. That can wait until Monday, she said, pointing to a vendor comparison I was still reviewing. I almost told her I did not mind finishing it. Then I closed the file. The change in my life was not a dramatic promotion or a surprise fortune. It was being allowed to complete work without becoming permanently responsible for every problem connected to it. I kept contact with my family, but not the old kind. Mom and I spoke every other Sunday. If she began a sentence with, "Your father needs help with," I stopped her and asked whether it was a family update or a business request. Business requests went to the people the business paid. Dad and I met for coffee twice during those first 3 months. He talked about retirement as if it were another project he had not yet learned to manage. He did not apologize for the party. I did not ask him to perform an understanding he had not reached. Paige and I saw each other at family visits. We were civil. She no longer had access to any account with my name on it. For Dad's next birthday, Mom planned dinner at home. She asked each of us to bring one dish. I brought the apple cake he liked, and a framed copy of the photograph Teresa had sent from the retirement party. The room had ordinary chairs. Music came from a speaker on the kitchen counter. After dinner, Dad opened 3 modest gifts. No one measured the evening against another person's celebration. When Mom began clearing plates, I helped carry 2 stacks to the kitchen. Then I put on my coat. "You don't have to rush off," she said. "I have plans in the morning." She nodded. No one handed me a receipt. No one asked me to settle a balance. There was no vendor account in my name, waiting to turn affection into obligation. At the door, Dad held the framed photograph against his chest. "Lewis told that Van story better than I remembered it," he said. He had been saving it a long time. Dad looked at the picture. "It was a good night. I'm glad." That was all. I had spent years believing love was proven by how quickly I removed difficulty from the people around me. The retirement party taught me something less flattering and more useful. Every rescue also teaches people what they may expect next. I still gave my family time. I still brought gifts. I still answered calls I had agreed to receive. What I stopped giving them was authority they had never asked for, because they assumed it was already theirs. Love could make me generous. It did not make my signature communal property.